Heyo, back at it again with another video. Thank you all for watching. I greatly appreciate it. So, I haven't talked about the war in Ukraine in a long time because honestly, there hasn't been a whole lot of movement along the front line, but that's more or less um, changed because there has been a looks like I don't know if it would be a full blown offensive. From what it seems like the Russians have a minor incursion from the Belgorod direction towards Kharkiv. So I think ultimately what the Russians are trying to do here is just extend the front even further. Because if you look at the line of contact, you have the Dnieper River right here, and that's pretty much been the line of contact in the south for the past 2 years. There hasn't been any movement down here. The Russians had logistical issues in the Kherson direction, and they ultimately withdrew across to the left bank of the Dnieper River. Again, the river flows from north to south, so on the west bank or the west side, that is the right bank, and on the eastern half of the Dnieper River, that is the left bank, because the river flows north to south from Kiev down towards Dnipro and Zaporizhia, down towards Kherson and emptying into the Black Sea. So that's point of contact's been pretty consistently stable for the past 2 years. The Ukrainians failed offensive. It made progress and then it completely stalled out because they've focused on too much of a wide berth. They focused from the Dnieper River all the way to Volodar, which if we head over towards Google Maps is, let's see if we can find Volodar on the map. Oh, here we go. Found it. All right, measure distance. The Ukrainian thrust was about a 90 mile, roughly 91 mile push from the left bank of the Dnieper River towards Volodar. I believe if they just focused on the Orikhiv direction, or if they just focused on just, you know, a 30 to 40 mile long front, then there could have been a serious breakthrough. Again, the Russians had some serious defenses in that direction. So the whole line of contact has been relatively stable. There's been a lot of movement lately within the Avdiivka Ocheretine part of the front. Avdiivka fell, I think, at this point 2 months ago. The Russians have been pushing towards Ocheretine. It looks like they have made significant gains in that part of the front. But Chasev Yar is another one that's been a big part of what's been going on. There's been fighting around there. The Russians are really trying to extend the front because if you look at the geography and if you look at the manpower, the Russians have the advantage. I think only looks like only 10 kilometers, give or take, pushed from Belgorod, pushed south towards places like Vovchansk and other villages along the Vovcha River because they're trying to extend the front and bring Ukrainian personnel from along the line of contact and extend it now over towards Kharkiv. So now the front, if we have an approximate, and now the front is roughly so Ukrainians now have to man, over 900 kilometers because now we have the Russians pushing towards Kharkiv. I don't think that's a full blown offensive. It doesn't look like a full blown offensive. I think it's just a distraction because they're trying to pull the Ukrainians, either pull the reserves or pull frontline forces from mainline point of contact towards another direction. What's interesting is there have been reports that there's anywhere from 200 to 300,000 Russians in the north of Ukraine not engaged in conflict yet. If if that is even remotely accurate, they can continue to extend the line of contact and even further, another 200 miles, another 420 kilometers, roughly, give or take. Or if you look at the map at the very beginning of the war, the Russians pushed through the Sumy direction because they were pushing from Kursk Oblast, from the Belgorod Oblast in Russia, through Sumy towards Kiev that way. Because remember that initial Russian thrust from Belarus and that 60-mile long convoy at the beginning of the war. There was also a thrust through Sumy. To be completely honest, if the Russians have this firepower, there's a serious possibility that the Russians push from Kursk through Sumy down towards Poltava and then potentially down towards the Dnipro River. The Dnieper River. Because if you have a force that strong, you can bypass Kharkiv, push past Sumy towards Poltava, and push towards the Dnieper River and essentially encircle all of the Ukrainian forces in this area. Because if you push down from Kursk through Sumy, down towards Poltava, and then down towards the Dnieper River, you then encircle all of these Ukrainian forces. And that's a serious possibility. I haven't seen anything that would indicate that happening, but the Ukrainians have a manpower shortage. And they're already very overextended on the line of contact. And if that force then pushes down through Sumy, bypasses Kharkiv, pushes towards Poltava, and down towards Dnipro and the Dnieper River, then all of these Ukrainians forces in this direction are all encircled. The geography and the manpower is on Russia's side because the Russians can keep extending the line of contact for another 400 kilometers. So there's a very real possibility that the front line does collapse. It hasn't happened yet. It may not happen at all, but there's a very real possibility that the front line does collapse because the Russians keep extending the line of contact and drawing out and thinning out Ukrainian forces that the Ukrainians don't have the manpower to be able to do that. The Russians have that manpower advantage. The Ukrainians don't. If you look at Ukraine as a whole, we go back to Google Maps. Ukraine is surrounded by Belarus, by Russia, by Crimea, which is now Russian occupied. Ukraine is surrounded geographically by Russia and Belarus and Russian occupied territory. The geography does not work in Ukraine's favor. So that's kind of my take on what the current situation on the front line in Ukraine right now. I mean, U.S. is giving all this aid, but if you don't have the manpower to use those weapons, then the weapons are essentially useless because there's no one to operate them, there's no one to use them, there's no one to maintain them. So the United States is spending all this money on weapons and all this material, but if the Ukrainians' manpower shortage doesn't fix itself, then what's the point of having all those weapons if you have no one to use and maintain them? So that's just my take on the situation in Ukraine. To be honest, the situation's kind of looking a little grim for Ukraine at the moment. But that's just my take. We will see what happens. We will see how the summer pans out. Maybe there will be a breakthrough from the Russians. Maybe we'll have another summer of gridlock and stalemate. We'll see. We do not know. Only time will tell. But that's my theory about potential scenarios for the upcoming couple months. There could be a stalemate, continued stalemate. There could be additional Russian limited incursions, or there could be a really big Russian summer offensive, and there's a potential for a Ukrainian frontline collapse. We don't know. We will wait and we will see. So I'm going to sign off, and I will see you all in the next video. Deuces.